It always began the same way. A young man, full of life, laughter, and promise, gone without a trace after a night out with friends. His body would later be found in a river, face turned toward the stars, smile frozen by death and cold water. And somewhere near the scene, drawn crudely on a bridge, a drain pipe, or a river wall, was a single, haunting symbol, a smiley face. For years, people thought it was coincidence. A graffiti tag left by kids, nothing more. But over time, as the death spread across cities, New York, Pittsburgh, Minneapolis, La Crosse, Chicago, the pattern began to form like a shadow creeping across a map. Dozens of young men. Same profile. Same circumstances. Same mysterious end. The police said the drownings were accidents, tragic, but not connected. Yet beneath the surface of the cold, dark rivers, another truth was waiting. One that law enforcement didn't want to see. It wasn't the water that killed them. It was something far more deliberate. Private investigators, retired detectives, and grieving families began connecting the dots, and when they did, a horrifying theory emerged. A network of killers operating in secret across multiple states, stalking victims, abducting them, and staging drownings to look like accidents. They called it the Smiley Face Killer theory. For years, it was dismissed, a conspiracy too wild, too impossible. But now, in 2025, new forensic evidence has surfaced. DNA links. Digital traces. Surveillance anomalies. And what investigators found in a locked FBI cold case file has changed everything. The unthinkable may finally be true. The theory first emerged quietly, in the late 1990s. Two retired detectives from New York City, Kevin Gannon and Anthony Duarte, were haunted by a case they could never let go. It was 1997. The body of a college student named Patrick McNeil was found in the East River, weeks after vanishing from a Manhattan bar. Police called it an accidental drowning. But Gannon noticed something that didn't fit. Patrick's body showed signs of restraint, bruising on his arms, and an unusual chemical trace in his blood. When Gannon dug deeper, he found something even stranger. All along the river, near the site where Patrick's body was found, were multiple spray-painted smiley faces. He shrugged it off at first. Graffiti was everywhere in New York. But when he began comparing his case files with those of other unexplained drownings of college-aged men, he realized this wasn't isolated. It was spreading. Over the next decade, Gannon and Duarte documented over 40 similar cases across 11 states. Each one carried the same eerie fingerprints. Victim, athletic, intelligent male, usually aged 18 to 25. Disappeared after a night of drinking, usually with friends. Found days or weeks later in a river or lake. Official cause, accidental drowning. Scene marking, a crudely drawn smiley face somewhere nearby. By 2008, the media caught wind of the detectives' findings. CNN, Dateline, and even law enforcement forums erupted with debates. Were these men just seeing patterns in tragedy? Or had they uncovered a network of killers who preyed in plain sight? The FBI dismissed the theory publicly, calling it not credible. But the retired detectives never stopped digging. In 2016, new forensic tools allowed them to re-examine evidence, and what they found reignited the case. A recovered pair of jeans from one victim contained fibers that didn't match anything from his clothing, his home, or the river environment. DNA testing later revealed traces from at least 2 unidentified males. Even more chilling, a toxicology report found GHB, the so-called date rape drug, in multiple victims. These men hadn't drowned accidentally, they'd been drugged, abducted, and disposed of. Patterns started forming across time zones. Victims in Wisconsin and Minnesota vanished on the same weekends as others in Iowa and Illinois. Phone records revealed mysterious pings, calls and texts sent after victims were already missing. A hidden network began to take shape. Digital forensics analysts traced a series of encrypted online forums rumored to discuss hunt nights and coded rituals. When the Smiley Face Killer theory was first proposed, people mocked it as urban legend. But now, in the era of dark web surveillance, investigators were finding evidence of something disturbingly similar. In early 2024, a cybersecurity whistleblower provided Gannon's team with access to encrypted chat logs from a private server based in Oregon. The chats referenced river trials, marks of laughter, and most disturbingly, a map of rivers and bars across the US, annotated with dozens of small yellow dots. Each dot, as later confirmed, corresponded to a real-life drowning site. But the turning point came in March 2025. A DNA cross-match from one of those 1990s cases suddenly lit up the national database. The match wasn't to any known suspect, it was to another cold case, thousands of miles away in Minneapolis. The DNA belonged to a person never caught, but tied to a second death with the exact same pattern, a young man found floating near a bridge, with a spray-painted smiley face only a few feet away. This wasn't a theory anymore. It was a pattern carved into decades of unsolved deaths. And somewhere, someone had kept it hidden. The night the case cracked wide open didn't start like much of anything. Detective Lauren Chase was back in the unit's archive room, a maze of old cardboard boxes marked Smiley, drowning cases 1999 to 2012, and unclassified patterns. The room smelled of mold, wet paper, and cold metal. But what she found that night would change the story forever. She had been reviewing photographs of a 2006 drowning in La Crosse, Wisconsin, a college student, Christopher Jenkins. Cause of death, accidental drowning. Case closed. Except for one thing. On the wall, behind where the body was found, barely visible in the original police photos, a faded chalk drawing. It wasn't much, a circle, 2 dots, a curved line. A smile. Lauren froze. It was the exact same pattern seen near 3 other drownings, all in different states. Her pulse raced. She cross-checked timestamps, weather logs, and forensic reports. Each drowning occurred under eerily similar conditions: nighttime, alcohol involvement, missing for 24 to 48 hours, no signs of struggle. And each one ended near a body of water. She reached for the National Crime Database. The deeper she searched, the more patterns appeared, from Minneapolis to New York, from Pittsburgh to Chicago. Then, she found something she almost wished she hadn't. The word Smiley scrawled in one victim's private journal. The entry read, "They said the water will smile back at me when I finally see them." The handwriting trembled. It wasn't suicide. It was fear. Lauren contacted retired Detective Bill McCarthy, one of the original officers who'd investigated the early cases. His voice on the phone was rough, distant. "I told them it wasn't coincidence," he said. But nobody listened. He revealed that he and his partner, Gannon, had been tracking over 40 similar cases, all young men, all found in rivers. Every time they brought their theory forward, it was dismissed as conspiracy. But Lauren had something they didn't: technology. She submitted DNA samples from the latest case, recovered from under the victim's fingernails. Results came back 2 weeks later. Partial match. Not to a random drifter, but to a man who had died in 2010, officially ruled a suicide. His name was Ryan Deeks, a former security guard who, according to records, had ties to multiple college towns. And then it got stranger. In an old storage locker under Deeks's name, police recovered a waterproof camera. Inside were photos, dozens of them, of riverbanks, bridges, and groups of young men at bars. Every photo had a timestamp, and every timestamp matched nights when victims vanished. Lauren leaned back in her chair, her breath shallow. "He wasn't working alone," she whispered. The angles of the photos, the timestamps, the positioning, all suggested multiple photographers. A network. A group. The theory that had been mocked for decades suddenly had a pulse. The Smiley Face Killer wasn't one man, it was several. A collective. Organized, methodical, and patient. The FBI task force reopened their files. Lauren and McCarthy joined forces, retracing the paths of victims. They visited one riverbank where divers had recovered a laptop months earlier. Forensics had deemed it waterlogged and useless. But Lauren ordered it re-examined using new data extraction tools. The drive revealed fragments of chat logs, cryptic messages sent through an encrypted network. The usernames: Watcher1, Riptide, The Smile, and Echo 47. The chats were disturbing, phrases like "make him laugh," "the river's waiting," and "tonight the water smiles." It wasn't random. It was ritual. As they dug deeper, one location stood out: a warehouse in Minnesota rented under a fake business name. When authorities raided it, they discovered evidence no one was prepared for. Clothing belonging to multiple victims. GPS trackers. A large digital map with pins marking over 60 rivers across the Midwest. And at the center of the map, a yellow sticky note with a hand-drawn smiley face. Lauren stood frozen. The air smelled like rust and damp concrete. "This isn't just murder," she said quietly. "This is a message." A hidden camera in the corner blinked red. Someone had been watching them. Seconds later, the power cut out. The team's flashlights flickered to life, beams cutting through the darkness. A door slammed shut somewhere in the building. McCarthy drew his gun. "We're not alone," he muttered. They chased the sound to a side exit, but by the time they got there, the alley was empty, except for a puddle of muddy footprints leading toward the river. Lauren knelt beside the prints. The smiley face, drawn with a fingertip, glistened faintly in the rain. It wasn't over. Not yet. The FBI released a statement weeks later acknowledging that a pattern of connected drownings across multiple states was under active investigation. They stopped short of confirming the existence of a group. But internally, the agents knew what they were facing. When the recovered chat logs were decrypted, one final message surfaced, sent just hours before the raid: "You can't stop the current. The water always wins." Lauren read the line again and again. The handwriting matched the journal from years before. The same phrasing. The same tone. Somewhere out there, the remaining members of the network were still watching. Still waiting for their next victim. She stood at the riverbank one evening, watching the reflection of city lights ripple across the dark water. For a moment, she thought she saw movement beneath the surface, a faint shimmer, a shape. She blinked. It was gone. But the unease lingered. She turned to McCarthy. "You ever think we'll catch them all?" He shook his head. "You don't catch the current, kid. You ride it. But one day, it runs dry." For the first time, she believed him. When the story broke, the world stopped to listen. News anchors struggled to speak through disbelief. A decades-old urban legend, now confirmed as a coordinated network, one reporter said, her voice trembling. Across social media, the term Smiley Face Killers trended for weeks. People who once dismissed the idea as a myth now faced the horrifying truth, that for nearly 20 years, a hidden group of killers had operated in plain sight, using America's rivers as their silent graveyards. Families who had long been told their sons' deaths were tragic accidents finally felt something they hadn't in decades: validation. In Wisconsin, Christopher Jenkins's mother, Sharon, stood outside her home surrounded by cameras. She held a photograph of her son, smiling in his college graduation gown. Her voice was calm but steady. "They told me it was just a drowning," she said softly. But a mother knows when her child was taken. "I've waited 20 years for someone to say it out loud." Lauren watched the broadcast from her office, the screen reflecting in her tired eyes. Around her, stacks of reopened case files covered every surface. New leads were pouring in from across the country, even from the UK and Canada. It seemed the pattern had echoes far beyond what anyone imagined. McCarthy entered the room, a folder in hand. "You're not gonna believe this," he said. Inside were police reports from a small town in Pennsylvania, dating back to 1997. 2 drownings, same pattern, same smiley mark, same ritual phrasing in a letter found nearby: "The water remembers." Lauren leaned back. "They've been around longer than we thought." The revelation sent chills down her spine. It meant the network wasn't just expanding, it had roots, possibly stretching back decades. Generations, even. As the investigation widened, so did the fear. College campuses began issuing nighttime curfews. Students were warned never to walk alone near rivers or canals. Parents installed tracking apps, and police started monitoring online communities that glorified ritual cleansing or baptism rebirth. But despite the fear, something powerful began to stir: unity. A movement called the Riverlight Project emerged, a coalition of families, activists, and investigators demanding accountability for all unsolved water-related deaths. Candlelight vigils lined riverbanks from Minnesota to New York. People held photos of their lost loved ones, candles flickering against the dark current. They chanted softly, "No more smiles. No more silence." The FBI, under immense public pressure, created a special unit, the Interstate River Crime Task Force. Lauren was appointed as one of its lead analysts. Her days blurred into nights, tracing digital trails, following patterns of usernames, and connecting obscure message boards where cryptic posts still appeared. The current flows again. But the more she uncovered, the heavier the truth became. In one recovered audio log, believed to be from one of the original killers, a distorted voice spoke calmly: "You don't understand the water. You think it takes life, but it gives it. We don't kill them. We return them." Lauren shut the laptop and stared out her office window, watching the city lights shimmer on the distant river. Her reflection overlapped with the water, a haunting symmetry. "You return them to what?" she whispered. But the only answer was silence. Months passed. More evidence surfaced: encrypted emails, obscure maritime symbols carved into stones near crime scenes, and a strange recurring number sequence, 23.11.7. It appeared in 4 cases across different states. Analysts tried decoding it. Dates, coordinates, ciphers, nothing fit. Until Lauren realized something. The numbers matched the latitude and longitude of a single point in the Mississippi River. She and McCarthy traveled there. It was a quiet spot, miles from civilization, where the current slowed and the water was unnaturally still. They found nothing visible, no bodies, no evidence. But sonar scans showed a large metallic structure deep beneath the surface. Divers went down. What they found changed everything. A submerged storage container. Inside, old cameras, hard drives, and what looked like ceremonial objects, rusted masks shaped like distorted smiling faces. One by one, the divers surfaced, shaken. They filmed it, one whispered. All of it. The footage, once restored, was almost unwatchable. Blurry nighttime shots of victims being led toward the river, disoriented, their faces half-lit by flashlight beams. Voices chanting, laughing, whispering in unison, "The water cleans. The water smiles." Lauren turned off the monitor midway through. The room felt colder. "We've been chasing ghosts," she said. "But they were always real." The discovery ignited a storm. Governments demanded answers. Documentaries flooded streaming platforms. Internet detectives dissected every detail, every smiley mark, every theory. Yet for all the exposure, the true identities of many members remained hidden. Some believed they'd integrated into normal society, changed names, started families, living ordinary lives while carrying unimaginable secrets. Years later, in 2025, the Smiley Face Killer case was officially declared partially solved. 57 linked deaths confirmed. 17 suspects identified. 6 convicted. The rest, missing, presumed dead, or untraceable. The announcement brought partial closure, but not peace. At the memorial site beside the Mississippi, families gathered under gray skies. A wall bore the names of the victims, each engraved with the same simple epitaph, "Return to the current." Lauren stood at the edge of the river, her badge reflecting the overcast light. "You think it's over?" McCarthy asked beside her. She shook her head slowly. "No. It just went deeper." The current murmured against the stones. Somewhere, beneath that restless surface, secrets still slept, waiting for the next ripple, the next whisper, the next name. No fresh bodies pulled from the current. The silence that once felt like dread now carried something else, a strange, fragile peace. Lauren visited the memorial alone that winter. The snow fell softly, melting against the engraved names. The candles left by families still flickered, their flames bending in the icy wind. She stopped at one inscription, tracing her fingers over the letters. "Ethan Shaw, 2004, she whispered, her first case, the one that started everything. A child's laughter echoed faintly in the distance. She looked up. Across the frozen river, a group of kids were playing, their boots cracking the thin layer of ice, their voices bright and careless. The sight made her smile faintly. It reminded her of what this work was truly for, not the headlines, not the fame, but the preservation of innocence. McCarthy joined her, his breath visible in the cold. "You ever wonder why they did it?" he asked quietly. "All that talk about cleansing, rebirth, the water smiling. What did it mean?" Lauren took a long breath. "Maybe it didn't mean anything," she said. "Maybe they just needed it to mean something, so they could live with what they'd done." They stood there a while, watching the river's slow current move under the ice. Every ripple caught the fading light, shimmering like fractured glass. "You know," McCarthy murmured, "the thing that haunts me most isn't what they did, it's how close they were. How many people might have walked past them every day and never known?" Lauren nodded. "Monsters don't always hide in the dark. Sometimes they sit beside you in the daylight." She placed a small white flower by the memorial. "We can't bring them back," she said softly, "but at least we gave them a voice." For a moment, the wind shifted, and she thought she heard something faint, a ripple, a whisper, maybe just her imagination, but it sounded like the river itself was responding. As if the water had finally spoken back. Back at her desk that night, Lauren opened the final report file, stamped in red, "Closed." She hesitated before signing it. "For now," she whispered, adding a note below, "pending future findings." She knew that mysteries never really ended. They only rested, waiting for someone brave enough to listen again. Outside, the moonlight glimmered over the Mississippi. The current moved softly, calmly, like it was carrying away the last secrets of the dead, or perhaps, delivering them to someone new. The camera would slowly pull back now if this were a film, showing Lauren standing by the window, small against the vast city below. The wind hums low. The world feels both heavier and lighter. Months later, the courtroom was quiet, the air heavy with anticipation. The last surviving member of the so-called Smiley Face network sat behind glass, his hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of years of silence collapsing upon him. Lauren watched from the back row as the judge read the final verdict. Guilty. The word hung in the air like a slow echo, cutting through the stillness. Some families wept, others just sat frozen, their faces pale, drained by decades of grief that had nowhere left to go. Justice had arrived, late, imperfect, but real. When the proceedings ended, Lauren stepped outside. Reporters swarmed the steps, their microphones hungry, their flashes relentless. But she didn't stop to speak. She just kept walking down the courthouse steps, past the noise, past the headlines. She had learned long ago that justice isn't loud. It's quiet. It comes in whispers, in the relief of a mother finally able to sleep, in the sigh of a father who no longer visits the river at night searching for something that isn't there. At the city's riverfront memorial, hundreds gathered that evening. Candles floated along the surface, each flame carrying a name. Some were lost decades ago, others more recent, all now united by truth. Lauren stood in the crowd, her eyes on the water, her reflection broken by the ripples of light. McCarthy joined her once again, placing a folded paper in her hand. "It's the transcript from the confession," he said. "I thought you'd want to keep it." She opened it slowly. The words were scrawled unevenly, almost desperate. "We did it for balance," it read. "The water demanded it. It smiles when it's fed." Lauren closed it. "No," she whispered. "It smiles when it's free." The sound of the crowd faded. The screen of the story would fade to the soft image of candles drifting farther away, their light shrinking into the horizon. A single note of music, a haunting cello, rises beneath the narration. In the end, the voiceover begins, "Justice doesn't erase pain. It only reminds us that truth still matters. That even in darkness, there are people who keep searching, not for glory, but for voices long forgotten." The frame slowly transitions to a collage of the victims' faces, young, hopeful, human. Then one by one, their names appear in small white letters. The music swells, hopeful, reverent. The voice continues, steady, emotional, resolute. Every solved case isn't an ending, it's a promise, that no story is too cold, no secret too deep, and no silence too final. Because every mystery deserves a voice. And every voice deserves to be heard. The final shot returns to the water, calm, almost still. The reflection of the moon looks like a faint, fading smile, but this time, not sinister. Peaceful. Every mystery leaves behind a voice, and tonight, we've heard it.